The Pharisee is more concerned with what others think than what God thinks. They are people pleasers. They should be God pleasers, but they're people pleasers. Let me give you some scriptures. John 12:42. Nevertheless, even among the rulers, many believed in him, but because of the Pharisees, they did not confess him, lest they should be put out of the synagogue, for they loved the praise of men more than the praise of God. For they loved the praise of men more than the praise of God. Disguised as piety, not a word we use much today, used to be a really good word. Back in the day, if you said someone was pious, that was a positive thing. Today, you're like, oh, they're pious, and you think it's a negative thing. Pious or piety should mean living holy, living righteous, living the way that the Bible describes us to live, right? But disguised as piety, some of the most religious, active people that you could meet do it because they want the accolades of people. They do it because they care what you and I think of them. They care what we're going to say about them. They love the fact that we think they're so holy and so righteous and that they're so godly. Now, they may indeed be living that way in certain aspects, but because they're doing it for the purpose of pleasing men, they're doing it as a Pharisee. Now, this is a tough line, isn't it? This is a tough line. But Galatians 1:10 says this, "For do I now persuade men or God? Or do I seek to please men? For if I still pleased men, I would not be a bond servant of Christ." Now, bond servant was that guy who had served 7 years of servitude, and at the end of 7 years, he was to be let go, and he said to the master, I don't want to leave you. I love your family, I love being here, I want to continue to serve you. And so the master would take the bondservant to his door, and he would actually nail his ear to his door, and then they would put a loop in that ear. And that meant that he is his servant by will. That he is deciding to serve that master because he loves him. The person who's not a Pharisee serves Jesus that way. They do what Jesus wants them to do because they love their master and they want to please their master. And sometimes, guys, to please Jesus is going to be displeasing to somebody in your life. It's true. Sometimes to follow Christ, you're going to have the opposite of accolades from certain people in your sphere. It's true, right? So why are you doing it? Are you doing it just for the pats on the back, for the attaboys? Are you doing it because you want to do what Jesus wants you to do? 1 Thessalonians 2:4, "But as we have been approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel, even so we speak, not as pleasing men, but God, who tests our hearts." So I want to encourage you not to get so caught up in trying to figure out your motives, that you are stressed about whether you should do something. Is this something I just want people to be, It's like everything else in our lives, in the Christian life. Focus on Jesus. Put your attention on Him. And just do what He says to do and walk in that. And He will test your hearts between whether it's pleasing men or it's pleasing God. He will bring that to your attention. If He brings that to your attention, what do? 1 John 1:9, you confess your sin and you admit to it, and God will cleanse you of it. He'll forgive you of it. That's how you deal with it. And then you move on. And then you move on. Listen, every one of us can, do, and will struggle with this. Because it's very easy to get caught up in the praises of men. It's very tempting to want that. And especially once you start getting it. It's like it just pulls you in to have people, oh, you're so great, you're so good, oh, you're so holy. I don't see a lot of that kind of thing around here. But, even when people are like, oh, yeah, well, that person, he really, really knows his Bible. And, he's not like the rest of us. He's a notch up. It's like, be careful. Be careful. Be careful not to puff their head up, and be careful not to let yours become puffed up. We want to do what we do for the sake of the Lord. And here's the final verse for this one that I think kind of seals the deal. Galatians 2:20. I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Live for Jesus. Live for Jesus. Live for his praises. Live for his glory. Live for pleasing him. And don't live for the pleasing or the accolades of man. So that's